Dominion. Who hasn't fallen in love with the game at some point? True, there are those that move on. I myself have gone way off in the deep end, and I don't play Dominion as much as I used to, but that doesn't mean it's lost its classic charm. So whether Dominion makes you feel fanatical or nostalgic, here are 10 recommendations for games you should try next. Before I go over the list, let's understand the rules. As is always the case, whenever I'm doing a comparison list, the games I list have to have something in common and be comparable to Dominion. If they were just 10 great games, I would call this video 10 best games, but it's 10 games for those who loved Dominion. So every game has something that captures the essence of Dominion. And the second rule is the list has to provide variety. For instance, because Dominion is a deck builder game, I could have just made a list of top 10 deck builders, but then that wouldn't really help people explore the world of games. My intention is to provide recommendations that will help people explore. And so while I could have done many more deck builders, I decided to not do that in favor of providing a little bit of variety. Besides, if you wanted a list of deck builder games, you could just go to theperfectboardgame.com, look up Dominion, find deck builder, and when you click that, you'll get a list of all the other games that are deck builders as well. Not to mention, at the Perfect Board Game, you can also buy this amazing hand-drawn t-shirt, which is made by me. Anyway, if you check that out, if you buy a shirt, it supports the channel, and I appreciate it very much. Thank you. That being said, let's get started with number 10, which is a brand new game. It came out in 2021, and the game is Furnace. Now, what Furnace does a great job of capturing from Dominion is that element of chaining cards together. One card plays an effect that has another effect on another card, and it just gets more and more exciting as the game goes on and as you collect more cards. But the way that cards are collected and the way the game is played is altogether different. There's no drawing and there's no discarding, for one. And secondly, this game is a bidding game with an excellent, very intriguing bidding mechanic. What you're doing is when the cards get dealt out for every round, every player places tokens on the cards. Now the card will go to the highest bidder, of course, but there is a benefit for those who are not the highest bidder. They get to perform a secondary action equal to the number of times of their bid. There's some great decision making going on in the game Furnace, but the only thing about Furnace that you should be aware of is it is a very abstract game, not very thematic, but great as an engine builder. Number 9 is actually a solo game, so how's that for variety? It also has an iOS version, which is the version that I have, and I've been playing it for years. I still really like it as a solitaire game. The game is Friday. Now, in Friday, you are Robinson Crusoe surviving on an island, and the island is full of hazards, represented by the cards in the deck. Now, you start with a hand of cards, and as you flip over the hazards, you have to defeat them using the cards in your hand. If you win, you get to take the card, and on the other side of the card is the value that you can use for fighting. So the idea is that you're gaining experience by defeating these hazards, and what you're doing is really pulling them into your hand to fight future hazards. Now, if you are defeated by a hazard, you lose life points, but you also get to discard cards from your hand. Now, what makes that really interesting is sometimes a hazard can come up and you might decide to deliberately lose because the card isn't very valuable to you and because the cards you're holding are hurting you too much. You'd rather lose a few life points to discard them. I think it's a fantastic decision making from round to round and an excellent solo game. Friday. Number 8 is a pure deck builder just like Dominion, but with an interesting new addition. The game is Mystic Vale, and much like Dominion, you draw cards every turn, and then you use those cards to buy more cards, which you discard, and as you go through your deck, you shuffle your discard pile and you repeat. The thing that makes it different, though, is in Mystic Vale, your cards are actually transparent sleeves. And so when you draft a card that you've purchased, instead of just adding it to your deck, you slip it into the transparent sleeve. Now, every sleeve can hold 3 cards. So essentially what you're doing is you're upgrading your deck, not adding to it. you'll always have the same number of cards. And as you upgrade your cards, they become more and more powerful, which allows you to buy the cards that will give you victory points. Again, much like Dominion. But this upgrade mechanic is very interesting to me. It's why this game made it onto the list. I think it's definitely worth looking at. Mystic Vale. Number 7 is a card game that I've been playing for years. It's such a great game. It's called Innovation. Now, in Innovation, every player is going through centuries of technology. And they start with very simple technologies like the wheel, and as they play through the game, they get better and better cards. On their turn, they can decide if they either want to meld a card, put it down on the table, and open it up for their second action, which is taking an action from the card. They call that dogma effect. Or they can buy a new card. So you're not always doing the same thing every turn. You're not always drawing cards and discarding cards, but you have choices. Do you want to expand the number of cards in your hand and in so doing expand your technologies? Or do you want to capitalize on the technologies you've already played? There's also some excellent player interaction with the number of icons on the cards. Now, the number of icons represents the type of technology, and basically what's going on is as players compete in different technologies, if you've got something and another player has equal or better technology than you, then the effect of your card is shared by your opponents. And that really affects gameplay a lot because you have to decide, do I want to do this and share that with my opponent over there? Maybe I don't want to do it. Maybe I'd rather draw more cards so that I can improve my technology before I take this effect. An excellent gameplay. Very chaotic though. It can get wildly crazy in later rounds as technology gets better, but I still love it. The game is Innovation. Now for number 6, you have to understand that I've ordered this list according to my best preferences for people who love Dominion. They're not in order of my preference, but number 6 is probably my personal favorite game. The game is Concordia. In Concordia, players are building a civilization, different colonies in Italy. Now that's a very common theme, admittedly, but what I love about the game isn't so much the theme as it is the card play mechanic. What's happening is you hold your entire deck of cards. Now, you don't have nearly as many as you do in a game of Dominion at the end. It's, I think, about 8 cards at the beginning. And as you play them onto the table, you can't play those cards again until you play the card that allows you to pick them all up. And during the course of gameplay, as you're playing cards and taking the actions on each card, one of the cards' action is to buy more cards. So you add to your hand and you're holding more cards, and every round you have to determine whether or not you want to play from the limited selection in the hand that you're still holding, or play that magical card that will allow you to pick everything up and start all over again. I really, really love this mechanic. I also think that the rest of the game is very streamlined. There's nothing that really holds you back. There's nothing complicated about the maintenance of the game or the cleanup phase or anything like that. So the games can be very swift, which I really appreciate. And one of the reasons why I like Concordia so much. Number 5. If you've been watching the channel for a while, you've learned that I have an affinity for games with a strong theme. So for this recommendation, it isn't so much a specific game as it is a mechanic of gameplay. I actually have 3 recommendations, but I'm going to stick with the most thematic one. So the type of game is a game where players are all affected by dice rolls. They're buying cards, and the actions on the cards are enacted when a dice roll comes up. So the first game I ever played that was like this was called Machi Koro. The next game that I heard of that was like this was Space Base, but the one that I'm most excited about is the one that I think is thematically the strongest of these 3, and that game is Bad Company. So in Bad Company, what you're drafting are a crew of people to help you with a heist. And so every card is upgrading the members of your crew. So you're adding more and more cards. And as dice are rolled, depending on what dice come up, the cards that you've used are utilized. And all players are doing this at the same time, which really adds to the gameplay. But then one of the things that I really like about Bad Company that isn't in Space Base or Machikoro is that there is a track where you are running from the police. And I think that's a really excellent complement to a game like this. If you want to take a look at it, it is brand new and the game is Bad Company. Number 4 is high on the list because I think it has just brilliant mechanics. The game is Elysium. And in Elysium, every turn you take, you are drafting cards, and you use these by purchasing them with tokens. And the interesting thing here about the tokens is that unlike currency, the tokens are not spent. You always get your tokens back for the following rounds. And everyone always has the same number of tokens, but the tokens are different colors. So what you're doing is you're looking at the colors on the cards and how many there are of each color, and you're spending 1 token each time and trying to save tokens that you can use to purchase later cards. If there are no more cards available that are of an appropriate color, you get a card, but it isn't worth nearly as many points in the end. So there's a lot of strategy about how you purchase the cards in the player order. I think that's very, very cool. And of course, like Dominion, each card that you buy has actions attached to it and also victory points. Okay? So here's the catch. I love this. During gameplay, as you first buy those cards, the actions are available to you, but after a round, you have to decide how many cards you're going to convert to victory points. So for those of you who love the thinking that you do when you're planning on when is the best time to buy victory points, in this game you're doing a similar process as you think when is the best time to convert cards from their actions to victory points. Once they become victory points, you can't use the actions anymore, but if you wait too long, you're not going to get enough victory points at the end of the game. I think that's so brilliant. If you want to try it out, the game is Elysium. Okay, here we are, top 3. You know they're going to be good. Number 3 is Orleans. Orleans is a lot like a deck builder, but it's a bag management game. What is bag management? If you haven't heard of this before, you are putting tokens into a bag, and on your turn, or everyone actually at the same time, is drawing the tokens out of the bag, and the tokens they draw determine what actions they can take for that round. So they sit down and they plan out where they want their tokens to go for associated with actions, and after all of the actions have been performed and the tokens spent, the tokens go back into the bag, shuffled up, and you do it again. And of course, during the course of the game, one of the actions is buying more tokens. It's bag management, so you're actually trying to manage the ratios of the different colored tokens. I think that's excellent, although it does have a lot more going on. This is a more complicated game. You have movement on a map, you have lots of different things you can buy, you have victory points going on. This is a heavier game than Dominion. Well, Dominion is pretty simple, so I would say it's a medium level game. Just be aware of that, the game Orleans. Number 2. So we have deck builder, and we've talked about a bag management. The next one, I would call it dice management. The game is Dice Forge. Dice Forge, it has cards, but you're not holding cards. The cards are just your points that you lay down in front of you. What you're really focused on are your dice. You have 2 dice, and every face of the die can be removed. And during the course of the game, as you roll die, you are collecting currency, which you can use to buy different die faces. And then you've got to decide which of my 2 dice do I want to put my new face on. Do I want to have, a face like this on both my die so that when I roll them, there's a possibility of getting 2 at the same time? Or do I want to put them all on 1 die to increase the probability? And there's a lot of thinking about probabilities in this game, but mostly I think the game is incredible value for your money. The components are amazing. The dice are solid, like the faces are nice. It's a fun tactile game. Also really good with families, Dice Forge. Number 1. Number 1 is by a designer who I've recommended many times on this channel. The designer is Phil Walker Harding, and the game is Gizmos. Gizmos has that engine builder mechanic to it. What you are doing is you are an inventor and you are building gizmos that will help you get victory points, but the gizmos interact with each other and have effects that will create chain reactions. So you perform one action and then you look at your gizmos, and each gizmo is triggered by the action you've just done, and then they have secondary effects. And so you perform those effects, and then some of those trigger other gizmos, and then those gizmos might have effects too. The only rule is that no gizmo can be used twice on your turn, but otherwise there's a lot of following along and going down the chain reaction, which I think is really interesting. The game also has excellent components. Once again, there's a tower. I wanted to call it a dice tower, but it's a marble tower. The marbles are really nice. The cards, I think, excellent artwork too. I'm excited about a game that plays well and looks good. See, I'm always skeptical of games that look great, and if they don't play well, I trash them. But if a game plays well and looks good, oh man, I'm in love. So those are my top 10 recommendations for people who loved Dominion. If you enjoyed this, definitely check out theperfectboardgame.com. That is my personal project. And if you want to support it, don't forget, the shirt helps a lot. There's also a link down below to my Patreon page. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you stick around for more comparisons between games and excellent lists. Take care. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.